The distress beacon had been silent for 6 hours. Lieutenant Marcus Webb stood in the communications bay of the UNSC Resilience, staring at the holographic star map that showed the last known position of the colony ship, New Eden. 17,000 human colonists, gone dark in the middle of their jump to the Kepler Reach. Lieutenant Webb. The voice came from behind him, sharp, crystalline, utterly devoid of warmth. He didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Overseer Cathfer materialized beside him, the Zenthari administrator's translucent form refracting the starlight into cold geometric patterns. The Zenthari didn't have bodies in the traditional sense. They were plasma-based entities contained within magnetically sealed exoskeletons. Beautiful, alien, utterly inhuman. The New Eden missed its scheduled relay check, Marcus said, keeping his voice neutral. I'm requesting authorization to deploy a search and rescue mission. Cathfer's exoskeleton pulsed once, a flicker of what might have been amusement. Request denied. Marcus turned slowly. 17,000 people. 17,000 humans. Cathfer corrected. The Zenthari's voice synthesizer made every word sound like breaking glass. The Kepler Reach is an uncharted sector. We have no mapping data, no established relay stations, no support infrastructure. Deploying rescue assets would violate 12 separate Galactic Transit Authority protocols. Those protocols exist to protect lives. Those protocols exist to protect galactic civilization from unnecessary risk. Cathfer drifted closer, his exoskeleton humming. Your species has only been part of the Union for 73 years. You still think in terms of individual survival rather than systematic efficiency. The New Eden carried acceptable losses for a frontier colonization attempt. Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. Acceptable losses. Statistically, yes. Human colony ships have a 14% failure rate in uncharted space. This falls within projected parameters. Cathfer's form flickered. The Union cannot justify resource expenditure for every statistically probable outcome. You will log the incident and move on. They could still be alive. If they are alive, they will adapt. If they are not, they have already contributed to our understanding of frontier hazards. The Zenthari turned toward the exit. This discussion is concluded, Lieutenant. Return to your duties. Marcus watched him leave. His hands were shaking. Not from fear. From something else entirely, something that felt like standing at the edge of a very long fall and choosing to jump anyway. He pulled up his personal terminal and began drafting a very different kind of message. By morning, 17 off-duty human crew members had volunteered for an unauthorized rescue mission. By noon, Marcus had been formally reprimanded and confined to quarters pending a disciplinary hearing. By evening, he'd already begun planning how to steal a ship. The disciplinary hearing took place in Conference Room 7. Which was really just an observation deck with pretensions. 3 Zenthari administrators sat in judgment, Cathfer in the center, flanked by 2 others whose names Marcus hadn't bothered to learn. Lieutenant Webb. Cathfer's exoskeleton pulsed rhythmically, a display of bureaucratic authority. You have been charged with insubordination, unauthorized mobilization of Union personnel, and conspiracy to commit resource theft. How do you answer these charges? Guilty, Marcus said flatly. I'd do it again. Silence. Even the station's ambient hum seemed to pause. The Zenthari on Cathfer's left, a smaller entity named Rethanol, leaned forward. You acknowledge that your actions violated protocol? I acknowledge that 17,000 people are dying while we debate protocols. You acknowledge that unauthorized deployment of Union vessels constitutes a severe breach of interstellar law. I acknowledge that human lives apparently matter less than paperwork. Cathfer's exoskeleton flared brightly. Your emotional response is noted but irrelevant. The Union functions on systematic principles. Individual sentiment cannot supersede collective efficiency. Marcus met his gaze, or what passed for a gaze, in a being made of contained plasma. Then your system is broken. The system has maintained galactic peace for 4,000 years. The system just told me to abandon 17,000 people because the rescue attempt might be inconvenient. Because the rescue attempt carries unacceptable risk for insufficient return. Kethver's voice sharpened. This is precisely why humanity struggles within union structure. You cannot separate personal attachment from operational necessity. You see tragedy where there is only probability. We see people, Marcus said quietly. We see families, children, scientists who spent their whole lives dreaming of touching an alien world. We see them. And that, Kethver said, is your fundamental weakness. The third administrator, an older Zenthari named Vexter, finally spoke. Lieutenant Webb, your service record indicates exemplary performance prior to this incident. You have adapted to Union protocols more successfully than most human personnel. Why compromise your career for a statistically improbable outcome? Marcus looked at each of them in turn. Because where I come from, we don't leave people behind. Not ever. Not for any reason. Even when retrieval is strategically inadvisable, especially then. Kethver made a sound like wind chimes in a hurricane. Then you are fundamentally incompatible with Union service. We cannot tolerate personnel who prioritize emotion over logic, sentiment over efficiency, individual attachment over systematic stability. You can't? A new voice cut through the chamber, female, calm, carrying the weight of absolute authority. That's fascinating, Overseer Kethver, because the Union Charter explicitly prohibits abandoning distressed vessels capable of supporting survivors. Everyone turned. Ambassador Rachel Torres stood in the doorway, her diplomatic credentials glowing on her wrist display. Behind her stood Commander David Park, the Resilience's human captain, and a Quellum legal advocate whose name Marcus couldn't pronounce. Kethver's exoskeleton dimmed. Ambassador Torres. This is a closed disciplinary proceeding. This is a potential war crime, Torres corrected, stepping fully into the room. And as the ranking human diplomatic officer in this sector, I'm formally invoking Article 12 of the Union Integration Treaty. The Zenthari administrators exchanged what might have been worried glances, their plasma forms flickering in rapid sequence. Article 12, Torres continued, states that member species retain cultural autonomy in matters of life preservation and rescue operations, particularly during the integration period. Humanity joined the Union 73 years ago. Our integration period doesn't expire for another 27. Article 12 applies to internal cultural practices, Vexter objected. Not Union resource allocation. The New Eden was a human vessel, crewed by human personnel, transporting human colonists under human settlement charter. That makes it an internal matter. Torres smiled without warmth. And Lieutenant Webb acted entirely within human cultural parameters when he attempted to organize a rescue mission. Silence. Furthermore, Commander Park added, his voice level but carrying an edge, I've reviewed the New Eden's flight recorder logs. Their last transmission indicated mechanical failure, not catastrophic destruction. Union law requires rescue attempts for any vessel with potential survivors. Union law balances rescue obligations against operational feasibility. Kethver began. Union law, the Quellin advocate interrupted, does not permit selective interpretation based on species. If a Zenthari vessel had disappeared under identical circumstances, would you have authorized rescue immediately? The silence answered more clearly than words. Torres leaned forward, placing both hands on the conference table. Here's what's going to happen, Overseer Kethver. You're going to authorize a search and rescue mission for the New Eden. You're going to provide full logistical support. And you're going to drop all charges against Lieutenant Webb and his volunteers. And if we refuse? Then I contact the Human Colonial Defense Force. Explain that the Union abandoned 17,000 human civilians. And watch your carefully maintained peace collapse when 20 billion humans decide they can't trust alien protection anymore. Kethver's exoskeleton flared so brightly Marcus had to look away. You would threaten interstellar war over a single colony ship? I would threaten interstellar war, Torres said quietly, over the principle that human lives matter, that our people matter, that we don't get treated as statistically acceptable losses just because we're newer to your little club. The Zenthari administrators flickered in rapid consultation, some kind of plasma-based communication Marcus couldn't follow. Finally, Kethver spoke. You will have your rescue mission, Ambassador. But understand this, humanity's insistence on prioritizing individual survival over systematic efficiency will limit your species' advancement within Union structure. You cannot reach the higher councils while clinging to primitive attachment. Then we won't reach the higher councils, Torres said. We'll stay right here, being primitive, saving our people. She turned to Marcus. Lieutenant Webb, you have 48 hours to organize your rescue team. After that, I can't protect you anymore. Marcus stood, saluted. Ma'am, that's all the time I need. As he left the conference room, he heard Kethver speaking to Torres in that crystalline voice. Your species will never understand what it means to be truly civilized. Torres's response followed him down the corridor. Maybe we don't want to. Not if civilization means learning to stop caring. The Mercy Run was technically a courier vessel, fast, maneuverable, equipped with enhanced sensors and a jump drive rated for frontier space. It was also 40 years old, held together with optimism and reclaimed parts, and absolutely not rated for search and rescue operations. Marcus loved it immediately. She's a piece of junk, Lieutenant Sophia Reyes announced, running her hand along the hull plating. The ship's engineer grinned. Perfect for what we need. Which is? Marcus asked. Something small enough that the Zenthari won't notice us leaving. Fast enough to actually reach the Kepler reach. And old enough that nobody will cry if we don't come back. Encouraging. I do my best. Sophia patched into the ship's maintenance logs. Give me 6 hours, and I can squeeze another 20% out of the jump drive. Won't be comfortable. But comfort's not really the goal here. Marcus moved through the Mercy Run's cramped corridors, checking systems, meeting the crew that had volunteered for a mission that violated a dozen regulations and might end with all of them dead in uncharted space. Dr. James Chun, no relation to the infamous Chun family from Old Earth, had packed enough medical supplies for a small hospital. If we find survivors, they'll need immediate trauma care. If we don't find survivors, he shrugged. At least I got to try. Corporal Lisa Santos, their security specialist, was calibrating weapons that technically shouldn't exist on a courier vessel. The Kepler reach is uncharted, she said without looking up. That means unmapped hazards. Pirates, maybe? Or worse. Worse than pirates? Space is big, Lieutenant. Lots of things hide in the dark. Navigation fell to Ensign Kevin Park, no relation to Commander Park, despite the shared surname. He'd plotted 17 different routes into the Kepler reach, each one more dangerous than the last. The New Eden was attempting a shortcut through an asteroid field when they went dark. If they're still there, they're trapped or damaged. If they made it through, he gestured at the star map helplessly, could be anywhere in 100 light-year radius. So we search systematically, Marcus said. We don't stop until we find them or run out of resources. And if we run out of resources, then we keep looking anyway. The crew exchanged glances, not worried, Marcus realized, reassured. They'd all volunteered for the same reason. They all knew what it meant. Humans didn't leave people behind. They launched 16 hours later, during a shift change when Union monitoring was at its weakest. The Mercy Run slipped out of the Resilience's docking bay like a ghost, jumped to FTL before anyone could raise an alarm, and vanished into the frontier darkness. The journey took 11 days. 11 days of recycled air and protein, paced and sleeping in shifts, while the jump drive hummed like a living thing. 11 days of checking sensors, reviewing the New Eden's last known trajectory, preparing for scenarios that range from routine rescue to everyone's already dead, and we're risking our lives for corpses. On the 9th day, they picked up a signal. Faint, Kevin announced, hands dancing across his console. Very faint. But it's definitely a distress beacon. Human frequency. Location? Edge of the asteroid field. Exactly where the New Eden was supposed to be. Marcus felt something unclench in his chest. Take us in. Carefully. The Mercy Run emerged from FDL into a graveyard. The New Eden drifted among the asteroids like a wounded animal. Her hull breached in 6 places, her engines dead, her running lights flickering sporadically. Debris surrounded her, fragments of hull plating, frozen atmosphere, objects Marcus didn't want to identify. Life signs? He asked quietly. Dr. Chun bent over his scanner, detecting heat signatures. Multiple compartments still pressurized. I'm reading ... Jesus. I'm reading over 12,000 survivors. 12,000. Out of 17,000. 5,000 dead. Get us alongside, Marcus ordered. Prep emergency docking procedures. I want rescue teams suited up and ready to breach in 5 minutes. Sir. Lisa's voice was tight. I'm picking up another signature. Smaller vessel. Non-human design. Pirates? Unknown. But they're moving toward the New Eden, and their weapons are charged. The unknown ship moved like a predator, sleek, purposeful, radiating threat even in the vacuum of space. Its hull was dark, absorbing light rather than reflecting it, and its weapon arrays tracked the crippled New Eden with obvious intent. Hail them, Marcus ordered. Kevin worked his console. No response. They're not even acknowledging us. Try again. All frequencies. Sir, they're locking weapons on the New Eden. Put us between them. Marcus's voice cut through the rising tension. Now, Sophia's hands flew across the helm controls. The Mercy Run lurched forward, positioning itself directly between the Predator and its prey. A human courier vessel, barely armed, deliberately making itself a target. Are we crazy? Lisa muttered. Probably, Marcus replied. Keep trying to hail them. This time, the response came immediately, a burst of static. Then a voice like grinding metal speaking heavily accented but comprehensible standard. Human vessel. You are interfering with salvage operations. Withdraw immediately or be fired upon. This is Lieutenant Marcus Webb of the Union vessel Mercy Run. He kept his voice level. The New Eden is a distressed colony ship carrying survivors. She's not salvage. She's under Union protection. Union protection means nothing in uncharted space. These are frontier territories. Salvage law applies, not when there are survivors aboard. Survivors are irrelevant. The ship is derelict. That makes her ours. Marcus felt his hands curl into fists. Let me be very clear. The New Eden carries 12,000 living human beings. If you fire on them, you're committing mass murder. And humans take that very personally. Laughter harsh, brittle. One human courier vessel against a Grix raider. You have no weapons capable of threatening us. You have no backup. You have nothing but foolish sentiment and empty threats. I have 17 volunteers, Marcus said quietly, who came into uncharted space to save their people. Do you really think we're worried about dying? Silence. Then the Grix voice returned, colder now. You would sacrifice yourselves? For people you don't even know? That's what humans do. More silence. Marcus watched his tactical display, calculating trajectories, weapon ranges, escape vectors. The Mercy Run couldn't win a fight, but she could buy time. Could die slowly enough that maybe, just maybe, some of the new Eden survivors could escape. Sir, Lisa's voice was very small. I'm detecting power buildup in their primary weapons. They're going to fire. Marcus took a breath. All hands, brace for. The Greek ship exploded. Not metaphorically, not gradually. One moment it was there, weapon arrays glowing with lethal intent. The next, it was expanding plasma and debris, scattering across the asteroid field like burning confetti. What the hell? Sophia began. Detecting multiple vessels dropping out of FTL, Kevin announced, his voice climbing an octave. Big vessels. Warships. 37 of them. The Resilience emerged from the darkness, surrounded by a fleet of human military ships destroyers. Frigates, a massive carrier that made the new Eden look like a toy. They filled the space around the colony ship like a steel wall, weapon systems active, ready for war. Commander Park's voice came through clearly. Lieutenant Webb, I believe you could use some assistance. Marcus felt something give way in his chest relief so profound it was almost painful. Sir, permission to coordinate rescue operations? Permission granted. And Webb? Ambassador Torres sends her regards. She decided Union authorization was taking too long. How did you, humans, take care of our own lieutenant? Did you think you were the only one who remembered that? The rescue took 36 hours. 36 hours of cutting through twisted metal, evacuating survivors through improvised airlocks, treating injuries that range from minor to catastrophic. 36 hours of carrying people out of the dark, one at a time, refusing to stop even when exhaustion made their hands shake. Marcus worked alongside Dr. Chun, helping stabilize survivors for transport. Most were in shock. Some were injured. All of them were traumatized by days trapped in a dying ship, wondering if anyone would come. You came, one woman kept repeating. Her name was Jennifer. She'd been traveling with her 2 children to start a new life on the colony world. You actually came for us. Of course we did, Marcus said. You're ours. She stared at him with hollow eyes. The Zenthari said. They said we were acceptable losses. The Zenthari, Marcus replied carefully, don't understand humans very well. On the second day, Commander Park came aboard the Mercy Run personally. He found Marcus in the medical bay, running on stimulants and stubbornness, coordinating triage for the latest group of survivors. Lieutenant, Park's voice was formal but not unkind. You need to rest. Still have 400 people aboard the New Eden. My teams are handling it. You've done enough. Park gripped his shoulder. More than enough. You organized this mission. You stood between civilians and raiders. You reminded everyone watching what it means to be human. I broke about 40 regulations, sir, and saved 12,000 lives. Park smiled faintly. I think we'll call it even. The Zenthari are very quiet right now. Turns out the entire galactic community was watching. Word spread about the abandoned colony ship, about the unauthorized rescue mission, about one human lieutenant who decided orders were less important than people. Park's smile widened. Ambassador Torres is fielding about 200 interview requests. Apparently, humans refusing to abandon their people makes for very compelling propaganda. Marcus slumped against the bulkhead. I just wanted to save them, I know. That's why it matters. The Resilience returned to Union space carrying 12,000 survivors and a fleet's worth of questions. The Zenthari administrators who denied the rescue mission suddenly found themselves under intense scrutiny from species across the galactic community. How many other ships? The questions began. How many other distressed vessels have you abandoned? How many times have you prioritized efficiency over life? The answers, when they came, were damning. Marcus spent 6 days in debriefing, answering the same questions repeatedly for different oversight committees. But between sessions, he began noticing something interesting. Other humans sought him out. Crew members from other vessels, civilian colonists, even a few alien species who'd served alongside humanity. They're investigating, Ambassador Torres told him during one meeting. She looked exhausted, but grimly satisfied. The Union Ethics Committee is reviewing 15 years of rescue authorizations. They're finding patterns. What kind of patterns? The kind where human vessels in distress receive significantly less support than other species. The kind where rescue resources get allocated based on political value rather than survival probability. The kind that suggests systematic discrimination. Torres pulled up a data file. 347 human vessels have been classified as acceptable losses over the past decade. That's 14 times higher than the galactic average. Marcus felt cold. They've been leaving us to die, not just us. Any species they consider politically inconvenient or culturally incompatible. But humans especially, because we keep insisting on things like individual rights, personal autonomy, and the fundamental value of single lives. She smiled without humor. We're inefficient. We care too much. We make everything complicated. So what do? We document everything. We find every abandoned ship, every denied rescue, every time the Union chose bureaucracy over breathing people. And then we make sure everyone knows. Torres leaned forward. The galaxy is watching, Marcus. Your unauthorized mission made humans look like heroes. Now we show them why heroes are necessary. The investigation expanded rapidly. Human legal advocates began filing complaints. Alien species who'd lost ships to acceptable losses joined the chorus. News networks across 3 spiral arms ran stories about the New Eden rescue, contrasting human determination against Union indifference. And slowly, inevitably, the case against the Zenthari administrators began to build. Marcus found an unlikely ally in Kelthar, a Quellan diplomat who'd been quietly documenting Union procedural violations for years. Your species is disruptive, Kelthar told him during one meeting. The insectoid's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. You refuse to accept that efficiency requires sacrifice. You insist that every individual matters, even when logic suggests otherwise. Is that a criticism? It's an observation. Kelthar pulled up more files. The Zenthari have governed Union rescue operations for 2,000 years. In that time, they've optimized everything: response times, resource allocation, probability assessment. They've made the system efficient, but they've also made it cruel. They treat sapient life as a statistical variable rather than an imperative. And species like humans, who prioritize emotional connections and personal loyalty, force them to confront that cruelty. Kelthar's compound eyes reflected the data displays. Your Lieutenant Webb didn't just save 12,000 people. He proved that the system could be defied, that unauthorized compassion could succeed where authorized indifference failed. The Zenthari hate that. The Zenthari fear it. Because if one human can ignore protocols and save thousands, what happens when millions of humans decide protocols don't matter? What happens when the entire concept of acceptable losses becomes unacceptable? Marcus thought about the fleet that had appeared to support him. 37 warships. They'd have to change, or face revolution. And humans, as your history demonstrates, are very good at revolutions. The Union Grand Assembly met in orbital station above Zenthos Prime, a massive structure that housed representatives from 147 member species. Marcus had never been inside before Junior. Officers didn't typically get invited to galactic political forums. He wasn't invited this time either. He was subpoenaed. Lieutenant Webb, Overseer Kethver's voice carried across the chamber. You stand accused of violating Union protocols, endangering Union assets, and acting without proper authorization in frontier space. How do you answer these charges? Marcus stood at the witness podium, acutely aware that every word would be broadcast across the galaxy. I acknowledge that I violated protocols, sir. I don't acknowledge that I was wrong to do so. The Union requires order. Protocols exist to maintain that order. By your own admission, you chose personal judgment over established law. I chose 12,000 lives over paperwork. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Kethver's exoskeleton flared. You chose chaos over structure, emotion over logic, individual sentiment over collective stability. I chose to be human, Marcus said quietly. And humans don't leave people behind, even when retrieval is strategically inadvisable. Especially then. Ambassador Torres rose from the human delegation. Overseer Kethver, I'd like to submit evidence to the assembly. The presiding magistrate, a neutral Quellan named Vexter, gestured permission. Proceed. Torres activated her display. Files appeared across the chamber's holographic systems, visible to all representatives. 347 human vessels declared acceptable losses over the past decade, 14 times the galactic average. In that same period, Zenthari vessels received rescue authorization in 96% of comparable scenarios. Resource allocation follows. Established probability models. Kethver began probability models that somehow consistently rate human survival as less valuable than other species. Torres pulled up more data. The New Eden carried 17,000 civilians. The Zenthari administration denied rescue despite clear evidence of survivors. Yet 3 months ago, a Zenthari research vessel with 47 crew received full military support within 6 hours of distress signal. The research vessel was conducting vital scientific work. The New Eden was carrying families, children, people who'd sold everything they owned for a chance at a better life. Torres's voice hardened. Tell me, Overseer, what makes their lives less valuable? Is it their species? Their lack of political influence? Or is it simply that humans refuse to accept that any life is acceptable loss? Silence. Kelther stood. I would like to submit additional evidence. More files appeared. Incident reports, denied rescue authorizations, casualty statistics. A decade of systematic discrimination lay bare for the entire assembly to witness. The pattern is clear, Kelther stated. Species who prioritize individual welfare over collective efficiency receive diminished support. The Zenthari administration has created a system where compassion is punished and loyalty is treated as inefficiency. The system maintains galactic stability. Kethver's exoskeleton burned bright enough to hurt. Individual attachment causes conflict. Emotional decision-making creates chaos. The Union prospers when member species accept that some losses are necessary for the greater good. And who decides? A new voice asked. Which losses are necessary? Everyone turned. Captain Render of the Kresh Directorate stood, his scaled form imposing even among aliens. The Kresh were warriors respected for feared, politically powerful. My species lost a colony transport 4 years ago, Render continued. 3,000 souls. The Zenthari administration classified it as acceptable loss. No rescue was attempted. He looked directly at Kethver. Now I learned that authorization was denied because my people requested emergency resources for a separate crisis the month prior. We were deemed resource-intensive, inefficient. More representatives began standing, sharing stories, voicing suspicions that have festered for years. My species, our colony, denied rescue because The assembly dissolved into barely controlled chaos. Marcus watched it unfold with something like awe. One rescue mission. One act of defiance. And suddenly the entire galaxy was questioning whether efficiency was worth the cost. Vexter called for order. It took several minutes to restore. When silence finally returned, the magistrate spoke carefully. This assembly will investigate all submitted evidence. In the interim, Overseer Kethver and the Zenthari Rescue Administration are suspended from authority pending review. He paused. And Lieutenant Marcus Webb is commended for exceptional service to sapient life. Kethver's exoskeleton pulsed once fury, defeat, maybe both. This assembly is making a grave mistake. Prioritizing individual survival over systematic efficiency will undermine everything the Union has built. Perhaps, Vexter replied. Or perhaps the Union has forgotten that systems exist to serve people, not the other way around. The tribunal lasted 3 weeks. 3 weeks of testimony, evidence, expert witnesses from 40 species. 3 weeks of humans and their allies systematically dismantling the bureaucratic structure that had governed Union rescue operations for 2 millennia. Marcus testified twice. Ambassador Torres testified 6 times. Kethver presented a statistical analysis that proved systematic discrimination beyond any reasonable doubt. The Zenthari administration fought back. They called their own witnesses, presented their probability models, argued that efficiency wasn't cruelty, it was pragmatism. That the Union couldn't function if every member species demanded resource allocation for every possible emergency. Resources are finite, Overseer Kethver argued during his final testimony. Attempting to save everyone spreads those resources too thin. The current system maximizes survival across all member species through strategic prioritization. Strategic prioritization. Ambassador Torres replied, that somehow consistently prioritizes your species and your political allies. We prioritize based on probability of success. You prioritize based on convenience. Based on who complains the loudest. Based on which species are willing to accept that acceptable losses is an actual category rather than a moral failing. Torres stood. The New Eden had 12,000 survivors. Your model said rescue was inadvisable. Lieutenant Webb went anyway and saved them all. How does your efficiency model explain that? It explains that Lieutenant Webb was fortunate. That probability favored an unlikely outcome. No. A new voice cut through the chamber. Commander Park stepped forward. It explains that humans refuse to accept probability as destiny. That we fight for survival even when logic says we shouldn't. That we care about individuals, even when caring is inefficient. He gestured to the gallery where the New Eden survivors sat, hundreds of them, bearing witness. Every person here was classified as acceptable loss. Every one of them was left to die by your system. And every one of them is alive because one human decided that orders mattered less than people. Emotional thinking saved 12,000 lives while your logical thinking abandoned them. Kethver's exoskeleton flickered. Your species will learn, Commander. Emotion is weakness. Attachment creates vulnerability. The galaxy is vast and cold and indifferent. Survival requires accepting that truth. Maybe, Park said quietly. Or maybe survival requires refusing to accept it. Maybe the galaxy stays cold because species like yours have decided that warmth is inefficient. The tribunal deliberated for 2 days. When they returned, Magistrate Vexter's voice was grave. The evidence demonstrates systematic discrimination in resource allocation. The Zenthari administration is found guilty of violating Union protocols regarding sapient life preservation. All current administrators are removed from authority effective immediately. Kethver's exoskeleton dimmed. This is a mistake. The Union will suffer without proper systematic oversight. The Union will adapt. Baxter continued. New protocols will be established. Rescue authorization will be reformed. And member species will be assured that their lives hold value regardless of political convenience. He turned to Marcus. Lieutenant Webb, your unauthorized actions violated numerous regulations. However, those same actions revealed systematic failures that required correction. This tribunal finds your conduct justified under exceptional circumstances. Marcus felt something release in his chest. Thank you, Magistrate. Don't thank me yet. Baxter's mandibles clicked. You've started something, Lieutenant. Changed something. The galaxy is watching to see what humanity does next. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the observation deck of the Resilience, watching the new Eden fully repaired. Engines burning bright, begin her journey to the colony world she'd originally been heading for. 17,000 colonists, 12,000 survivors from the original crew, plus 5,000 more who'd volunteered to replace those lost. They're calling it Webb's World, Ambassador Torres said beside him. The colony. They voted on it. Marcus shook his head. I just did what anyone would do. No, you did what humans do. What we've always done. She gestured to the departing ship. You refuse to accept that some people don't matter. That some losses are acceptable. That efficiency matters more than lives. The Zenthari still think I was wrong. The Zenthari think a lot of things. They think emotion is weakness. They think attachment is inefficiency. They think systematic optimization is more important than individual survival. Torres smiled. They also thought the Union would collapse without their administration. They were wrong about that too. Below them, the new Eden jumped to FTL, carrying dreams and futures toward a new world. The new rescue protocols are working, Torres continued. Response times are down. Survival rates are up. Turns out that caring about individuals doesn't make the system less efficient. It makes it more humane. Kethver won't accept that. Kethver doesn't have to. The galaxy saw what happened. They saw humans risk everything to save their people. They saw systematic indifference confronted by stubborn compassion. They saw 12,000 lives that were supposed to be acceptable losses refuse to be lost. She turned to face him. You changed something, Marcus. Something fundamental. You proved that the cold equations don't have to win. That humans can look at probability and logic and systematic efficiency and just say, no, we're doing it anyway. Marcus thought about the Mercy Run, about his volunteers, about 12,000 survivors who shouldn't exist according to the Zenthari's probability models. We don't leave people behind, he said quietly. That's not strategy or propaganda. It's just who we are, what Earth made us. We come from a world that tried to kill us every day, and we survived by refusing to give up, by fighting, by caring about each other even when caring was hard. Class 12.4, Torres murmured. Not just a rating, a promise. We survived the death world. We'll survive anything else the galaxy throws at us. By being inefficient, by being human. The Resilience drifted in orbit, surrounded by the cold vastness of space. But inside, in corridors and crew quarters and observation decks, humans lived and worked and cared about each other with systematic disregard for efficient detachment. Marcus's communicator chimed. Another ship needed rescue. Another crisis required human stubbornness to solve. Another probability said something couldn't be done. He smiled and headed for the command deck. The galaxy was vast and cold and logical. But humans had survived worse than cold, had defied worse than logic, had loved too stubbornly, cared too deeply, fought too hard to accept that any life was acceptable loss. Earth had given them that. Class 12.4. Not just a measurement of environmental hostility, but a measurement of what survives it. What thrives despite it. What looks at systematic indifference and systematic cruelty and systematic efficiency and says, with perfect human stubbornness, not today, not our people, not ever. The resilience jumped to FTL, carrying that promise toward whatever came. Next, because humans didn't leave people behind, not even when logic said they should, especially then. The end.